Hello everyone, my name is Phantasm. I've been a competitive Forsaken player for a long time now, and I have a pretty deep understanding of the game. And today we're ranking every single character in the game up to the newest killer, Nosferatu. Now, this tier list will be ranked based on public servers. This means how good a survivor is, or a killer is, in public servers. What does this mean? Well, I'm gonna assume that whoever plays these characters is gonna be an average player, which means they're not that good at the game. They don't know every single technique. They're not gonna play extremely efficiently, but they understand their characters and how to kind of use them. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off, noob. Now, as a pure survivalist, he provides absolutely no value to the team. Okay, his only merit is that he's decent in LMS, and even then, there are better survivors than him in LMS. For example, Shed, yes. But anyways, he provides no value to the team, and if you see a noob in your team, you might as well not be there. You're never gonna see him body blocking or anything. They're probably just gonna be doing gens and emoting in the corner. So for that, we're gonna put him in the useless tier. Now, same thing for N7. Now, there's more stuff you can do with N7, where you can clone parry, you can clone body block, but again, you're never seeing that in a public server because the average player doesn't understand how they will use it. I don't blame them. It's a pretty advanced, they're advanced techniques. But, in public server, if you see N7 or noob, they're generally useless to the team. They're not going to do anything. Next up, we're going to move on to Veronica. Veronica is actually useful because of her bumper. Now, she just got nerfed. Her bumper is not as strong. Her phase is not as strong. Still, her bump is still extremely powerful as a distance creator. It creates the same amount of distance as 2 guest charges. And only problem is that your teammates have to go up to you, to, go near where you're set up for you to use it. You can't really skate across the map to bump, because at that point you're gonna be out of stamp and the killer can swap onto you. So we're gonna put her on mid tier. She's decent. The bump is somewhat useful to the team, but in public servers, you're not gonna see a lot of Veronica using her properly. Now, Shedletsky. Shedletsky is probably the most simple Sentinel to use. He just got a slight buff to his slash distance, and Chicken is a pretty decent self-sustain, 40 HP heal, pretty decent. He has the most simple stun to use. You can't really go wrong with him. Even if a player's not that great, a slash is still a slash. You're probably still gonna stun the public server killer just because they can't really react to your slashes. And we're gonna put him in gray tier because he is just the most consistent sentinel in public servers. No matter how bad the player is, they generally cannot go wrong with Shedletsky. Unlike 2-Time, where 2-Time not only has low HP, so he spawns with 80 HP, he can mess up really easily with his stabs, even though he's really strong right now as a character. Public server players are not going to use him properly. They're going to mess up their stab, and they're just going to die instantly because he has 80 HP. Crouch is not that useful. It's decent as a chase tool, but again, public server players are not going to use him properly. So yeah, just because he's a little bit more difficult to use, and he's so squishy, so it's high risk, I'm just putting him in the bad tier because, majority of 2-Time players you see in public servers are just going to die instantly after missing a stab. You rarely see a 2-Time who actually knows how to trick stab properly or set up around corners. Yes, some suffers a pretty similar issue with 2-Time, where you can mess up a lot. For example, you can mess up a block. Your average pub Forsaken player is not gonna know how to react block. They're not gonna be able to react the abilities, the M1s. So he's just not gonna get as much value in a public server compared to an organized competitive environment. So a charge, again, it's a very slight distance creator tool. It's just completely outclassed by Veronica Bump, but it's still a bump. It's still a little bit of distance, but in public servers, distance is just not as effective as stuns or, you know, slowness and heal. Stuff like that come from support or other sentinels. Just because, you know, your teammate's gonna mess up. They're not gonna path properly. So that a little bit of distance you create is not gonna make it that big of a difference. And because of that, because of how easily it is to mess up, though he does have a 115 HP, that's the only reason he's not in bad tier. He's a little bit better than 2-time because, you know, he's way more HP, and yeah, his ability is a little bit easier to use. So we're putting him in mid tier. I love Veronica just because, you know, 20-second bump is just easier to use, and you just can't go wrong with Veronica. But with Guest, as I said, you can go wrong a lot of ways. Now, Chance. Chance suffers one problem that a lot of characters suffer in this game, is that he's not that useful in chase. Because his shot is really strong when you're out of chase, but it's really easy to dodge when you're the one being chased. And you can also spawn with really low HP. Like, you can spawn as low as 60 HP and just combust spontaneously off spawn to like a fast killer, like a Get 666 jumping to you off spawn. But yeah, if you do like manage to reroll a high HP like 100 something, and you get your gun, you know, and you cancel abilities, like, you generally cannot go wrong with Chance. He's not as simple to use as Shed. Shed, you just slash and generally hits around the killer. Chance, you actually have to position yourself and like aim. But again, it's a ranged instant shot. It's pretty hard to miss. I'm putting him in great tier because he is pretty decent. You know, his shot is reliable. If you have 3 charges, that is, you still have a 10% chance to not shoot. But after the recent changes, where if your gun explodes, it also stuns in AoE around you, it's really funny. Like, it's probably not worth to use that explode stun, but you know, it's something, right? It's a slight buff. And yeah, you just can't go wrong with Chance and Shed, so that's why they're in great tier. We're moving on to the supports. Now, Deucecart. Deucecart just got a slight buff to his shield where it prevents death once. Okay, if someone's 1 HP and they get hit by an M1 while shielded, the shield will tank that hit and the shield will disappear, but the person will not die. Unlike before, where it's just a resistance and they can still die through it. Deucecart is actually a fairly difficult survivor to use, where one, it's difficult for the user to use him properly to land beams because you need aim and shield at correct times, because it is quite unintuitive if you don't like know what stamina your teammates at, what stamina the healer's at. And also, it's your public server players are not going to use like his abilities to the fullest. If a public server player gets shielded, they won't know that they should regen stam, or if they get beamed, they won't know they can tank a hit for free speed. But overall, like, he's an active support that, you know, you can do stuff with. And, you know, it might be a lifesaver. It also hard counters Get 666, so that's another thing. But because he is slightly difficult to use, we're going to put him at the top of mid tier. Though, keep in mind, he is really strong. It's just that public servers means, you know, you're not going to be able to use him to his fullest, because your teammates are not going to understand how to use him properly, or, you know, utilize his abilities. Now, Builderman. Builderman is a setup character similar to Veronica, where he sets up a sentry, he sets up a dispenser. Very, very simple to use. Probably the easiest character to use in this whole game. Problem is, your public server teammates are not gonna go to your sentries and dispensers, even though they're like, there's a big bright highlight. So that might be a problem, but as long as your sentry's down, the sentry essentially acts like a stun. So, you know, it basically extends chase automatically for free, like every single time, if your teammates go to your sentry, that is. But yeah. I'm gonna put him at the bottom of great tier. He probably is more effective than Chance, and maybe even Shed, but just because your teammates are not going to go to your sentries, he's going to be put at the bottom of grade tier. You can never go wrong with this character. If you have a Builderman on your team, it's always better, you know? Like, you can never go wrong with having a Builderman on your team. Elliot. Now, Elliot is arguably, well, not arguably, he is the strongest character in this whole game. He just got nerfed to his pizza. His heal is delayed and heals a little bit less off spawn now. If you do a lot of gens, you can end up healing for 45 HP total, which is more than what it used to be. But it is slightly difficult. But he is just so simple to use. The pizza is such a strong ability. He has the strongest support ability in the game, being pizza, and the strongest self-sustained ability in the game, being rush hour. It's just a free win chase. So, because he's just the combination of two strongest ability, he's automatically being extremely strong. Like if you have an Elliot in the game, like having an Elliot in your team is like a game changer. Where if you don't have him, it might be a server wipe, but if you do have him, it might literally be a 0k. That's how much of a difference he can make. Like I would recommend always having an Elliot in your team. He's so strong right now, and very simple to use. You just throw the pizza to your teammate, and they just go grab it. Now, Taff. Taff suffers a similar issue to Builderman, where he's a setup character, and you know your teammates can just not go to your setup, which happens a lot actually in public servers. Problem is, Taff, it is a little bit less intuitive for teammates to use Taff setups, where Builderman sentries are just gonna get destroyed and it acts like a stun. Whereas Taff, helpless and slowness aren't as intuitive. Like, you know, your teammate can still die even though you've slowed the teammate and you made them helpless for 5 seconds just because they mess up or something. So it's just not as straightforward and not, you know, as simple to use as Builderman. So we're gonna put him probably below Dusakar, because Dusakar is just really strong. But above Veronica, because, you know, it doesn't take that much skill to use Taff, but it does take skill to use Veronica properly. So yeah, that's it for all the survivors, for public servers, that is. This is how you can evaluate how strong your team comp is in a public server. For example, if you have like 8 survivors, which are a combination of Elliot, Shed, Chance, Builderman, maybe even Dusakar and Taff, you know you have a really strong team comp. Like, you're winning every single round. But if you have, for example, Noob and 7, 2-time guest Veronica, you know you're kind of screwed. Like, even though you might have great players on the team, your team comp is just weaker. Alright, now we're moving on to the killers. Similar thing, we're assuming that these are average players playing the killer against average players playing survivors. Now, Slasher. Slasher is actually really strong. He's very simple to use, and he punishes lack of teamwork, which there's not a lot of teamwork going on in public servers. So he thrives really well. Actually, that doesn't make sense. He thrives in public servers because he can just hunt down survivors one by one, and if the survivors aren't coordinated enough to help each other, he can quickly server wipe a, you know, decent server. But yeah, you know, he just runs up to you, and then he raging pace, and then he catches up, and then he has a second stamina bar. He just like kills you instantly. You spontaneously combust in front of Slasher, and for that reason, we're putting him on great tier. This doesn't mean he's a very strong killer though. He is very counterable, especially if you have a team of players who know what they're doing. But it's just because that pub servers are generally unorganized, and you know your teammates aren't gonna mess up, so they might die to him. This like feeds into the Slasher, you know, killing player one by one playstyle. Now I can't say the same for Cool Kid, simply because he just doesn't have as much rushdown, and Cool Kid is just harder to use than Slasher. Like if you miss a walk speed override, you're kind of screwed. Like the chase is lost. You just have to restart the chase. Overall though, Cool Kid is a stronger killer than Slasher, just because he is harder to use. That's why we're gonna have to put him in the lower tier compared to Slasher. We're gonna put him at mid tier. Alright. Now we're moving on to John Doe. Now, John Doe is actually, I would say, the most complicated killer to use. Your average pub killer is not going to use him properly, just because zoning is a much less intuitive concept to most players than, you know, just chasing the survivors down. But John Doe does have the benefit of survivors randomly just stepping your traps for absolutely no reason, so it's just free speed for you. So I don't think he's as good as Slasher in public servers. Keep in mind, he is probably the strongest killer so far. He's objectively stronger than Cool Kid and Slasher, but just because he's harder to use, we're gonna have to put him top of mid tier, better than Cool Kid. Now, 1x. 1x is also a pretty strong killer, much easier to use compared to John Doe, and honestly, it's a very simple killer to use. Just throw projectiles at survivors, and if the survivor, it's like a skill check for the survivors. If they can't react, dodge projectiles, you can get a lot of damage for absolutely free. Especially mass. Like, people tend to not click out of entanglement fast enough in public servers. You sometimes can get away with entanglement and mass infection combo, like a lot of times, and that just evaporates a player. And it just punishes like bad pub players, and it's really easy to use. Like, the counterplay is not as intuitive on the survivor side. Well, it is intuitive. You just gotta run away from the 2-time and just react to his mass infections and dodge it, and that kind of makes 1x kind of useless. And also, 1x abilities are really easy to cancel by Shed, Guest, and Chance. But, you know, your pub servers are not going to cancel abilities properly, so that, like, artificially boosts 1x's strength. So we're going to put him lower on, a little bit lower than Slasher. Slasher is just so easy to use, and, you know, it's really easy to serve a wipe at Slasher. But 1x, you kind of have to think a little bit how to land your abilities and stuff. And yeah, though I will say 1x is almost a guaranteed LMS win, just because you have the Rejuvenate, the Rotten, you summon minions, and it's always a free win if you have like 5-6 minions. Now, Noli. Noli actually punishes pub players a lot. He's actually a pretty weak killer. He's weaker than 1x and John Doe, and probably even weaker than Cool Kid. But the problem is, public server players are so unaware that Void Rushes can be really strong. You've definitely seen those public servers where people are just always clumped up around the killer, and Void Rush is just really strong in those scenarios. You can get a lot of bounces, ramp up in damage, and just slant someone and instantly kill them with like 60-70 damage. And Observant Void Rush is a really deadly combo in public server, just because people don't realize they should probably find cover and look where you're Void Rushing from. So just because he's such a powerful killer in public servers where people don't work properly, people don't work together properly, and you know, they're generally unaware, we're gonna put him in extremely strong, just because, you know, he kind of feeds into that, like, benefits from people being unaware and, you know, lack of teamwork. I will say though, like, he's a little bit harder to use than Slasher. Definitely not on the scale of John Doe, but, you know, like, you just gotta know how to curb your Void Rushes and you're probably fine. Now, yes, 666. He is probably the strongest pub stomp killer. The snowball of his blood hunt is just way too strong. You're always gonna have, like, not great players, I should just say bad players, in public servers that just gives him free blood. And once he gets the blood going and he just blood hunts over and over, maybe 2, 3, 4 times, like, the whole server is just done. The server is just dead. Like, as long as he gets some blood to start, he can snowball really, really quickly. There's always people giving him free blood in public server, just because, you know, not every player is, like, good enough to avoid his hits and roars and pounces. On top of that though, he also just got a buff where small obstacles are much weaker against him now, because he no longer has to run towards a survivor that's highlighted to get his speed, you just need to be near them. On top of that, is that Slasher is really strong against Sentinel heavy comps, but much weaker against support heavy comps. Because support abilities are just as effective outside of Bloodhunt as they are in Bloodhunt, but Sentinel abilities are basically useless in Bloodhunt. It just results in a free kill. So, yeah, but public servers, of course, tend to skewer towards the Sentinel heavy comps because, people like playing Sentinels. And that kind of helps Sixer in another way and just makes Sixer overall a really strong pub stomp killer. And for that reason, we're going to put him at the top of extremely strong. He really is the strongest pub killer. Like, if you see him in a pub lobby, most of the time he's killing that whole lobby. And, he's really simple to use as well. Like, all of his abilities are really intuitive. And if you do pop Bloodhunt, you just get a bunch of free kills. Alright, we're going to move on to the newest killer. Now, I played quite a bit of this new killer in public servers, against average players, against competitive players, and we've tested some stuff. I have to say, he is probably the worst killer in the game. Now, he has like a little bit of everything. He's a mix of 1x and John Doe, I would say. And Noli, I guess. So he has a ranged attack that does not go through walls. That's kind of a theme across his ability where his stuff doesn't go through walls. He has a range ability that kind of acts like an entanglement where if it hits someone, it drags them in and you kind of have to play a minigame with the survivor. Which, if the survivor plays properly, you'll never win the minigame. The killer can never win the minigame if the survivor doesn't mess up. Which, they might mess up. That's unlike the minigame. Just click some buttons. And it does 15 damage. If you do land the follow-up, it does 20 on top of that. But, you're probably never landing that. And that's the range ability. He also has a zoning ability similar to John Doe Wall, where he goes really fast and lays out a path of puddle that slows and bleed the survivors. This ability is really difficult to use properly, simply because, again, zoning is a unintuitive concept that most public players don't quite understand how to use properly, at least currently. So it just makes this ability weak, and most of the time it just makes you lose distance. And next ability, he's another ranged ability where he sends out a bat. The bat does 5 damage. The damage is not the main point. The point is that you gain invisibility. That's also not the main point. And also that specific survivor takes 25% extra damage from all your abilities. So how to use this is where you land your bat, and before you want to land any of your other abilities, and then you go M1 them, and they take a chunk of damage, or you go land your hook or something. It just increase your rush down potential. Problem is, again, this ability doesn't go through wall. It's a ranged ability that gets destroyed the moment it hits an obstacle. And it's just so difficult to use in chase. It's completely useless in loops where there are tall walls or there's a ceiling. The way you kind of have to use it is you throw it up in the air and then you redirect it down, because you can redirect it once. Or if you're in the survivor's face, you just throw it in their face. But yeah. Last ability is he turns into bat. He flies up in the sky. It's a pretty good movement ability. And he can pounce down. He can do 40 damage. Now this pounce is really difficult to land. You're landing it once probably the whole round. And as long as the survivor is somewhat aware, you're probably never landing it. After you come down from the pounce, from the dive bomb thing, you get slowed and helpless, so you just cannot catch up, and you're forced to reset chase after landing that. And overall, his whole kit is like a jack of all trade, master of none. well, like he just does too little damage, and he doesn't excel at anything. And if you do play him, he just kind of feels kind of lacking in every area, and that's why he ends up in the bad tier. But yeah, overall, these killer ranking basically tells you how likely an average player is going to, do well against a server playing these killer. Like if a player who's average plays extremely strong killer, for example, Sixer, he's much more likely to server wipe compared to if he played Nosferatu. But yeah, thank you guys for watching the video. This is my first Forsaken video. If you guys want to see more contents like this, make sure to sub, like, and comment down below. Well, I'll see you guys next time.